What I'm going to introduce you to in this video is a way to classify numbers as either being even or being odd. So what does it mean to be even? Well, an even number is one where if you had that many donuts, you could split it evenly between two people. So even numbers are numbers that are multiples of 2. So if you have 2 donuts, you could split them. If you had 2 people, you could give 1 donut to each person. 4 donuts, you could split that evenly with 2 people. They could each get 2 donuts. And then we could keep going. All of the multiples of 2, these are even numbers. 8, 10, 12, and of course we could keep going on and on and on and on. And an easy way to spot an even number is that its ones place is going to be even. So for example, the number 32 is an even number because in the ones place you have a 2. The number 5,977,354, well, that's an even number because the ones place is even. Now there's one number that's an interesting one. Why some people sometimes say, well, is this one really even? And that's the number 0. And the number 0 is even because it is a multiple of 2. How is it a multiple of 2? Well, 0 times 2 is equal to 0. So 0 is a multiple of 2, and so 0 for sure is an even number. And then that actually makes our looking at the ones place idea hold up, because a number like 150 is an even number, and we can look at the ones place of it and we say, oh, we have a 0 there, and a 0 is an even number. So if in the ones place you have an even number, you are looking, the whole thing is going to be an even number. So what are odd numbers? Well, one way to think about them is they're the numbers that aren't even. So not multiples of 2, not multiples of 2. So what are some examples of odd numbers? Well, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and of course you can go on and on and on. And just like we could look at the ones place to spot an even number, you can also look at the ones place to spot an odd number. The number 59, well, I have a 9 over here in the ones place. 9 is odd, so this is going to be an odd number. The number 1,441 has a 1 in the ones place. That is an odd number. So this whole thing is going to be odd. And so what's another way why is it called odd? Well, it'd be hard to split 1,441 donuts. You can't split it evenly between 2 people without breaking up a donut. If you wanted to leave the donuts whole, one person would have to get one extra donut than the other person. You can't split it evenly. The easiest way I think about odd, it's not a multiple of 2. It's not even. So another way, it is not even. So now that we know what an odd or an even number is, let's think about what happens when we operate on odd or even numbers. So let's think in particular, actually let me move over to the side right over here. Let me move over right over here. Let's think, whoops, I fell off the screen. Let's think about what happens if I take an even number plus another even number. Is this number, the sum, is it going to be even or odd? Well, you could take some examples. If I say 2 plus 6, that is going to be equal to 8. Well, 8 is an even number. If I say 14 plus 4, well, that equals 18. Once again, 8 in the ones place, this is an even number. If I say 156 plus 100 and, I'm going to do a simpler number, plus 4, that is equal to 160. 0 in the ones place, this also is an even number. So it looks like all the examples that I've done so far, when I add an even to an even, I get an even number. And I encourage you to keep trying this out. I encourage you to keep trying. Pick some even number, then another even number, add them together, and you'll see that you'll keep getting even numbers. And it makes sense, because if you add one number that's a multiple of 2, and you add it to another number that's a multiple of 2, it makes sense that the sum is going to be a multiple of 2. Now what happens if you add an odd and an odd? What happens if you add an odd number plus another odd number? Well, let's try. What is 1 plus 3? Well, that's equal to 4. You actually get an even number. You add two odd numbers, you get an even number. Well, maybe that was just that special case. What if I add 15 plus 7? These are both odd numbers. When I add them together, I get 22. I get another even number. This is interesting. If I take, let me say, 19 plus 3, actually that gets us to 22 again. We have an even number. This is interesting. What about let's see, 23 plus 5? Well, that gets us to 28. Once again, get an even number. So the pattern that seems to be forming here is that if I had an even plus an even, I get an even. But also if I have an odd plus an odd, then I also get an even number. And then once again, I encourage you to try out as many numbers as you can to see if this pattern holds. And you will see that it is true. An odd plus an odd number is an even. Now let's think about one last combination. What about an even? What about an even plus an odd? An even plus an odd. So let's say I have 2 plus 1. 2 plus 1, well, what is that going to be? Well, that's going to be equal to 3. That's going to be an odd number. Well, what about 4 plus 3? 4 plus 3, well, that's equal to 7. That's equal to an odd number. And so it looks like if I have an even plus an odd, and I've only tried out 2 cases here, but I encourage you to try out many, many, many more to make sure that you feel good about this. But an even and an odd is always going to give you an odd. So this is always going to give you an odd. So let's just remind ourselves. Even numbers, they're multiples of 2, including 0. Odd numbers are just numbers that aren't multiples of 2, that aren't even. And an even plus an even is going to be equal to an even. An odd plus an odd is also going to be equal to an even. We saw that multiple times. But an even plus an odd, that is odd.